Hello, this is Angelia, and you are listening to or watching the podcast, Why You Do What You Do. Podcast, that talks about human development and psychology to maybe help you figure out a little bit more about why you do what you do. And today we're going to be talking about disengagement theory versus activity theory. Who is making a healthier adjustment? A person who tranquilly watches the world go by from a rocking chair, or one who keeps busy from morning till night? And the answer on that is it depends on what they prefer to be doing. If they're not doing what they want to be doing, they're going to be unhappy. If they're doing what they want to be doing, they're going to be happy. So everybody's different there. If an older person would like to get out and go, then that's what they should be doing. There are older folks who their retirement goal is to sit in a recliner and watch TV. I know a man just like that. Okay, if that's your goal, you worked hard and you just want to sit there and watch movies all day, go for it. If that's what makes you happy, then you're going to be happier with your life. According to disengagement theory, aging normally brings a gradual reduction in social involvement and greater preoccupation with the self. And in general, that does happen. Older people, start thinking more about themselves. If they need some improvement, if they need, to get back into a spiritual way of life, they reflect on their life and how it went and what they wish would be different. You can't change it, so there's no use dwelling on that. But then some people, now that they don't have to work anymore and the, kids are out of the house, decide it's time for them to get back into stuff they were into when they were younger and, hang out with friends more and stuff like that. So, really it just depends, on who you are and what you want out of your life. According to activity theory, the more active people remain, the better they age. So, again, we have these two theories, disengagement and activity theory, and they're kind of at odds with each other. So, like I say, it depends on the person. There are, in life we know that there are people who are more social and people who are more antisocial. And of course, the more social people are going to want to go out and be social and do things that they didn't get to do when they were younger, and, making a life. And the antisocial people are going to like staying at home more and, watching TV. So, it all depends on who you are. Disengagement theory was one of the first influential theories in gerontology. And I know a friend of mine who that's what he does. He's a gerontologist. And they study aging and older folks. He works with the mental health side of things. He's a counselor, licensed, social worker. There are studies that people have done on aging and older folks. And that's, how we learn this stuff. Its proponents saw disengagement as a universal condition of aging. So some people thought, that's just the way it is. We get old, we disengage, and, we sit there and, wait for it to be gone. And some people do that. Like I say, I know a man who does that every day pretty much. He goes out, enjoys, eating out and getting some food and going to the drugstore and things. But other than that, he likes being at home watching TV. So, again, it just depends on who you are and what you want out of your old age. They maintain that declines in physical functioning and awareness of the approach of death result in a gradual, inevitable withdrawal from social roles, such as worker, spouse, parent. And since society stops providing useful roles for the older adults, the disengagement is mutual. And some people, they do, lose a spouse, their children grow up and move away, they don't talk to them as much anymore or anything. So they do kind of feel that gap there that, is not being filled by anything else, because a lot of places don't want to hire older people. That's kind of my husband's situation. He's going to stay where he is, but physically, he's not in great shape. And now that he's had a stroke, not so much mentally. But it takes a big toll on him. He comes in, with his hips hurting and everything every day. And I've tried to get him to go for a desk job, as a parts guy or manager somewhere. But he doesn't want to start, this late in life, when he's only got, 5 to 7 years left, of working, because he's afraid nobody will hire him. And I said, with your experience, you have 30 years experience, I guarantee you somebody's going to hire you. But he's just decided he's going to stay where he is for now, but I hope he can, and last, because, like I say, he's tearing himself up. Disengagement is thought to be accompanied, as Jung suggested, by introspection and a quieting of the emotions. Like I say, a lot of old people, they sit there and look out the window and think back on their life, all the time. And I know a woman like that. And, it doesn't do any good. It's going to make you, sad and depressed if that's what you're doing all the time. And some older folks, emotions do quieten down. Some go the other way. Some, because of, declining mental health or physical health, get more emotional and their emotions are out of control. I know some people like that too. And, that's not great, for the folks around them to have to deal with that. After nearly 4 decades, disengagement theory has received little independent research support and has largely disappeared from the empirical literature. So, they feel like it's not necessarily a thing now. That maybe the people they looked at were like that. They weren't that social to begin with. So, they've kind of just stopped looking at that, really. David Gutman has argued that what looks like disengagement in traditional cultures is only a transition between the active roles of middle age and the more passive spiritual roles of late adulthood. So, like I say, when you're between the ages of 30 and 60, that's when you're raising your family, you're establishing yourself in your career, you're teaching others stuff you learned or whatever. So those are your really active years, between 30 and 60. And then once you retire, you don't have that going on anymore. So it may even look like you've disengaged when you really haven't. You're just having some time to yourself. I have a uncle who's retired now, and he's loving it. He's enjoying sitting at home and watching whatever he wants and just doing whatever he wants whenever he wants, because he had a hard physical job too. He was out working at a factory. So it might not be that people necessarily disengage. They might be just taking some time for themselves that they didn't get to take when they were younger. And that true disengagement occurs only in societies in which elderly people have no established roles appropriate to their stage of life. Like I say, it all depends on, what health you're in, physically and mentally, what you can do in your late adulthood. Like I say, some people, out there, they're doing it, and it's like more power to him. It's like, gosh, how old was the guy? I don't know, 102 years old, ran in that marathon, I guess, last year. But it's like, if you can do that, go do it. But there are other people who can't do that, and they might just be happy, watching movies all day and going out every now and then. If that's what makes them happy, then, that's, something that is positive, The result may be less than optimal satisfaction with life and underuse of human potential. And again, like I say, my mother-in-law is in assisted living, and she is not happy. She's got dementia, so and she can't walk anymore. So she really cannot be in her home. We don't have anybody who can stay with her 24/7 and can pick her up off the floor. That got to be an issue. And, she is so forgetful. Like I say, you'll have the same conversation with her 3 and 4 times, and she's getting people messed up now, who is who, and how they're related to each other, and things like that. So she really can't, be on her own anymore. But she had a nice, 4-bedroom house and a nice big property, and a lot of nature, and that's what she really liked. And she likes sitting there watching her birds and everything. And we've done everything we can to make her comfortable. We have the bird feeder. She has 3 bird feeders outside her window, at the place. She has her chair from her house, her recliner, and the nice TV that her other son bought for her. So she had nice TV to watch, and she's still just not happy, and she just sits there a lot and gets depressed. And they have this big activity board of stuff that she could be doing. Like I say, when I retire, I'm not going to be sitting there worrying about it. If I have to go to, I'm already retired, but I'm still teaching. But if I have to go to a home, which I might have to, I'm going to be realistic about it. My husband's like, I'm never going to go, and then I'll be mad. No, you won't, because if you have to go, you have to go. If we're falling in the floor and can't nobody pick us up, and we don't even know, who we're talking to, then we should be at home. That's just the facts of life there. But I'm not going to sit there and feel sorry for myself, because it's like, well, okay, this is my reality now. These are the facts. My feelings are just that. They don't really matter in the situation. And if I have enough presence of mind, I'm just going to, get with the program, as the saying goes. Like I said, that list of activities, on the board every day that you could be doing, I'm going to be doing that, because I'm not going to be sitting in my room being sad if, like I say, if I'm in my right mind enough to know, we don't ever really know what's going to happen to us, that's kind of the thing I'm afraid of. It's like I'm going to lose my marbles, Some people joke that I never had any to begin with, but I did, and, if you know me, you know that. According to activity theory, an adult's roles are major sources of satisfaction. The greater the loss of roles through retirement, widowhood, distance from children, or infirmity, the less satisfied a person will be. So, again, the more you were involved in when you were in middle age, and the more things you lose or fall off, the less satisfied you are going to be. So a good idea is to take those things and find a substitute for them if you can't still do them. Find something else to fill your time. Because if you were an active person and then suddenly you're inactive, you're not going to be happy about that. Your mind is just going to be like, oh wow, I'm just useless now, and you got to do something, like I say, pick up a hobby, learn some, new languages, do something, to keep yourself from feeling like my life is over now, because it's not. Until the day God calls you home, your life is not over. So, People who are aging will keep up as many activities as possible and find substitutes for lost roles. So, like I just said, we're all going to get to the point where we can't do the stuff that we used to do when we were younger. That's just a fact of life. You live long enough, that's going to happen. It's already happened to me. There came a point where I'm just like, I can't do this anymore. And I knew that, and, people who knew me knew that. But, people didn't know me, decided the story was different. And, that in my opinion is a reflection on them. That, that's how they are so negative that they feel that's how it is. So that tells me in their mind that would be a possible thing for them. But for me, it's not. So, For some older adults, even such a mundane activity as mall walking can serve a substitute for the sense of purpose, belonging, social contact, and self-discipline previously derived from paid work. We have those at our malls here. The old folks gather early in the morning, and then we have, a Walmart time down where our farm is, where it's for older folks and people with sensory issues early in the morning, so that they can go in without all the noise and everything, and do things. So there are things to do. You can check your local paper. You can Google, and there's stuff probably around you that you can get involved in that will give you that social contact and a sense of purpose, and some exercise if you're going to go mall walking. Wear your walking shoes, and it's better than sitting in the house being depressed, if that's what sitting in the house does to you, is make you depressed. Like I say, there's some people that's their goal, and that's peachy keen with them, to sit in their house and watch TV all day. That makes them happy. I earned this right to sit here. I earned this for 50 years, But like I say, to each their own. So, research on the engagement hypothesis suggests that involvement in challenging activities and social roles promotes retention of cognitive abilities and may have positive effects on health and social adjustment as well. So, oh my goodness. Oh my nose is so itchy. It's hot here and everything's swelling and sweating, and it's not cool. You do need to keep the noodling if, you want it to keep noodling, noodle, don't noodle. But, like I say, you can study different languages. You might never use it. Like I said, I've been using mine because we've had an influx of, immigrants that speak Spanish here. And so every now and then I have an occasion, with someone at a restaurant or people we know at a store and everything, to use it. So, you're going to be slower than a young person. It's not true that you can't teach no dog new tricks. It just takes longer to learn the tricks. So, keep the noodle busy. Like I say, my dad is a big watcher of Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy. So, he guesses the answers and things. And, he said he's becoming dated now because there's newer answers that he doesn't know. He knows all the old stuff just about, but there's newer stuff from the 90s on he doesn't know because it's not part of his culture. It's part of my children's culture. They would know. I might not know either. But, so he's decided he's becoming a little dated because there's new stuff that he doesn't know about. And, that's okay. It happens to us all. Like I said, I was doing things the hard way on my computer one day, and my middle son is like, why don't you just use your snipping tool? And I'm like, my what? And he's like, here, I'll show you. And he showed me, and I'm like, well, that would have been great to know. I could have been doing that all these times. I've been copy pasting and, printing and, cutting stuff. That would have been nice to know. He's like, you didn't know that? And I'm like, well, no. I said, we got computers my senior year in high school, and they didn't have such things. So I was still doing everything the old-fashioned way. But, he showed me that, and I'm like, oh, that would have been so much easier. I wish I'd have known this. He's like, well, they taught us that. I was like, well, see, I'm old, and, we had the old computer, the little black guy with a little screen this big, and the writing on it was white. That's what we had back in 1985, So, you learn something new if you pay attention every day. But, yeah, if you keep your noodle going, it is going to help you to stay. Like I said, if you don't use it, you lose it. A little, better aware, and to be able to use yourself, your brain. And again, if you like social contact and you were a friendly person, you might want to go find some kind of a social network in order to continue to be a social person. But like I say, some people are not social people. They never were, and they prefer to be, withdrawn in their own little world, and that's fine too, if that's how they are, because if you try to force someone, into a social situation and they're not a social person, that's going to cause them anxiety. They're going to get angry and upset, And there's no sense in that, especially if you're got an older person. There's no sense in doing that to them. They've reached a state of equilibrium, and just let them have that because as it said about here about the end is coming. Let them have their time to enjoy their life. Activity theory has been influential, but at least as originally framed, it is generally regarded as oversimplistic because, like I say, not everybody does well with activities. Not everybody wants to be involved in activities. So, again, you can't really say either way. It's subjective, and everybody's different. So, in early research, activity generally was associated with satisfaction. And that's because, the sample they had was probably people who liked that. And like I say, if a person gets depressed when they're, sitting home alone, then getting them active is going to make that better. However, some disengaged people also were well adjusted. So see, there you go. Some people who disengage from society are still well adjusted because everybody's different. Like I say, if you want to go out and do stuff, travel around and make friends and play bunco or whatever. One of my son's family girlfriend's families that they do bunco. So if that's what makes you happy, go for it. But if that would be your idea of heck, then you don't want to do that. So everyone's different, and you have to go by what your elders' personality is. You can't, as the old saying says, you can't fit a square peg in a round hole. They made a TV show, Square Pegs. But, that's just the facts of life there. This finding suggests that while activity may work best for most people, disengagement may be appropriate for some. And that generalizations about a particular pattern of successful aging may be risky. Because, like I've been saying through this whole thing, everybody's different. If you are a social person, you're going to be happier if you're doing things and being social. If you're an antisocial person or a non-social person, the antisocial seems, a bit rough declaring, that. But some people are just non-social. They don't like social, engagement. Now, I'm a friendly person. I like to make friends. I like to be friends. I like to go hang out with people and do things with people. But I also have a limit. I know there's a certain point where I've been overstimulated, and I have to kind of withdraw and go back to home base. So to people, and I'm probably on the spectrum because I have children on the spectrum. So it runs in families, and my husband is, I know. So I probably am too, based on different things I've seen in myself. But some people might think that's, well, she was being so nice and strong, coming on strong and talking and stuff. Then she suddenly withdrew. Did we say something wrong? Did we do something? No, I just came to the point where, like, I've had enough of this. I need to go back home and regroup. And it's not anything anybody's done. It's just so much, interaction leaves me tired. It just leaves me emotionally tired. And like I say, I'm sure that is, like I said, they're autism, we have Asperger's in the family. And so, that might have something to do with it. I might have a little Asperger's myself. But I'm neither super social nor antisocial. I'm in the middle. That's where most people are. Most people like to socialize upon occasion and in some instances, and then they like to be having alone time in their space. So, you have to go by what your elder person's personality is. You can't, force them into situations that they're not going to be happy in. For some people, in some circumstances, accumulated roles can enhance health and well-being. For others, the result may be role strain and ill health. So like I'm saying, if you're trying to force that non-social person in a social situation, that may be too much for them. That's going to put strain on them, cause them anxiety, and can cause them ill health even. So, don't try to force someone who's been non-social all their life, just because they're old, into social situations. You feel like they would be better off if they were, because it's not going to work that way. So, like I say, the bee needs to be the bee, and the butterfly needs to be the butterfly. So, Furthermore, most of the research on activity theory has been of necessity correlational. If a relationship between activity levels and successful aging were found, it would not reveal whether people age well because they are active, or whether people remain active because they are aging well. And I just noticed my microphone's like pointing the other way from when I had my computer that way, so hopefully you've heard me. But again, it's where you fit, what you like. If you like going out and walking at the mall, then you're going to continue to like that. If you like going out and volunteering and doing things in the community, you're going to continue to like that. If you don't like that and you want to stay at home and watch movies and eat pizza, then you're going to continue to like that. So, like I say, everybody's different, and you can't take the square peg. No, it doesn't work. So, you have to think about your elders' mindset and what is going to work for them. If a relationship between activity levels... I already went there. Okay. Much research has found that healthy older people do tend to cut down on social contacts, and that activity in and of itself bears little relationship to psychological well-being or satisfaction with life. So, pop-ups. Just because, you think things should be a certain way doesn't mean they should be a certain way. And even if the elder engages in some activity, like I say, not everybody is the same. So it's hard to, like I say, you don't want to force someone into situations they don't want to be in. That's like my father. He has a relative who says, you need to get out and do this and that and the other thing, and he's like, to heck with that. I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do it. So like I say, you can't say that everyone benefits from this, but some people do, especially if they were in a very active way of life, and then suddenly they don't have that anymore. They might be depressed about being home alone and not having that active lifestyle, and those are the folks who would benefit from getting out and finding something to do with their time, or doing something at home. I mean, the hobbies are endless that you could be doing, and like I say, you could even make a little money from your hobbies maybe. However, activity theory has not, so far, been discarded, because there's still some truth in it for some people. Like I said, it depends on how you were before you got older and retired. If you were active, you're going to want to stay active, because if you suddenly don't have any activity in your life, you're probably going to get depressed. If you were not active, then you're probably going to want to stay not active, because that's what you want out of life. A new view is that activities do affect well-being, not so much though through social roles as through their impact on the sense of self-efficacy, mastery, and control. So, older folks need to be able to do for themselves. You can give them some prompts every now and then. We did that the other day. But they need to know that they can still take care of themselves, that they're in charge of themselves. And there are people who, once they decide you're a certain age, they're like, okay, you're old now, I'm in charge, here's how this is going to be. And that's a terrible thing to do to people. Like I say, there's a woman that my mother-in-law talked to, whose children just decided, once she got so old, she was too old, they were putting her in a home, selling her house, and dividing up her stuff, and they hardly ever come and see her. And so that's sad, but there are people like that who do that. And like I say, we don't know the whole story. She might have been a terrible, horrible mother, we don't know. But you need to be able to live your life the best way you can live your life. And if that's staying in your house till you can't stay anymore, then that's what you should do. If you need more socialization, if you need help doing things, then you might have to go somewhere else. So, it's a very individual thing. And that's why you have the disengagement versus activity theory here, because it's very subjective. Everybody's different, and no one size fits all on this one. So, some gerontologists have sought to refine activity theory by comparing past and present activity levels. Of course, that goes without saying. What did you do before? What are you doing now? And you can maybe give some suggestions to some older folks who are not so happy with their situation now, to help them have a better life and to live a better life. And that's not what we all want, is to live your best life until the day that the Lord calls you home. Others maintain that the type or content of the activity makes a difference. And it does, of course. We're not all going to be happy just doing something, randomly. We're going to want to do things that mean something to us, So, those are the type of activities. They're going to mean something to you. And, if it's not something that you're into or not something interesting, then you're not going to want to do it. And that's just, common sense right there. So, that's where I'm going to leave you for today. And that's the current thoughts on disengagement theory versus activity theory. Some folks are going to want to check out, do their own thing. Some folks want to get involved and be active, and that's just a fact of life. So I hope that helped you figure out maybe a little bit more about why you do what you do. Please like and share this educational program so we can spread it around the world. If you want to help me out, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you want to help me out even more, go to my Patreon page and become a patron. Thanks for watching. That's all for now. Until next time.